Welcome back to the Closer's Inner Circle podcast with your host, Denise Griffitts and Ben Gay III. We are now at week 13 of our Sales Infiltration Masterclass, and the momentum has not slowed down, and neither should you. In this episode, we're diving into the next topic of the Closer's Part 2 Sales Infiltration chapter, which is the most important chapter in the book, according to Ben Gay, who wrote the book, and that starts on page 257. Now, we are talking about where the psychology of selling takes center stage. We've been talking about it, and it's so important. This week is all about understanding the mind behind the sale and how to guide high stakes conversations with confidence and finesse. Now, whether you've been following us since week 1 or just tuning in, you're in for practical insights and real world strategies that elevate your sales skills. And we encourage new listeners to go back and catch earlier episodes because each one builds towards sales mastery. And we also recommend, in fact, I highly recommend that you have your closers parts 1 and part 2, these books, in front of you as Ben shares his decades of sales wisdom. And Ben Gay III, I love to say that's just fun. Ben Gay III is once again bringing decades of top-tier sales expertise to the table. So grab your closers books and follow along. And we're not just talking about closing deals. We're showing you how to read the room, influence outcomes, and close with intention. So let's get started. Good morning, Ben. I hear from you told me in the green room we have a new pope.
We don't have it. Yes, we have a new pope, but we don't know who it is. We yet. I have the television monitor on so I can see it, but no one's walked out. Not even the cardinal to introduce the new pope. But we normally keep these shows evergreen. But just to give you a marker in time, in California right now it is 10:12 a.m. and on May 8th.
8th, right? We're a day
2000,
late with our show today.
yeah, 2000, May 8th, 2025, and we are minutes, maybe seconds away from the new pope, whoever it is, walking out on the balcony. So that's sort of interesting, historical
It
moment in
is.
time. I think in my life, he's like the fourth, will be the fourth or fifth pope. My mother was Catholic. I'm not, or uh, but it's still historical and interesting for the 1.7, especially for the 1.7 billion with a B Catholics in the world. And so this one has been really uh, church changing, for lack of a better word. I'm quoting from things I heard in the last day or two. There are 13 cardinals in the 133 that will be voting or have voted who are from countries that never had a cardinal before. Until Pope Francis appointed them. And of the 133, he appointed 108 of them. So it'll be interesting to see if his thinking proceeds on or there's a change or whatever. I'm a historical nut and a political junkie. So I'm always fascinated by stuff like this that can be earth shaking or earth changing to a degree. Even if you're not Catholic, it affects other things.
I agree with you. And I've watched, I think, the last 3 because I'm fascinated by anything to do that's historical and has a lot of weight to it. I've always been a history buff, and going from Pope John Paul, I think it's John Paul, this, and then the second, and then Benedict. How in the world? This is just me musing out loud. How did they go from them to Francis? I'll never understand it.
Hmm. Yeah, quite a shift. It'll be interesting to see
Yeah,
if
it
there's another
was.
shift. My favorite, almost became a Catholic just out of enthusiasm, was Pope John. The
Yeah,
wrote
John, then John Paul, then John Paul. I can't remember their names, but I
John
know there
Paul
were
the Second.
right, but there were
Yeah,
3 that were, I thought they were really decent guys, and I
Pope John
I'm
is
not going to say
yeah,
what I thought about Francis and his leanings.
uh, Pope John was the greatest thing I think that happened to the modern Catholic Church because he was fun and loving and open and so on. And I remember thinking, if if he'd been in when mother and my grandmother were trying to recruit me or change me, I probably would have signed up. He was really something. Um,
And which one
speaking,
died very young?
huh?
Which one passed away very young? I remember actually weeping over him because I liked him.
Yeah, I don't know which one you're talking about because none of them are young in the
No, but
traditional
I think it
sense, or you
was
wouldn't be Pope.
right. It was Pope John Paul and then John Paul II. So it was John Paul that passed. It was
Hmm.
really unexpected, I think. I'm just talking off the top of my head, but I remember thinking, oh no, he was young, he was entertaining. I liked what he was saying. I'm not Catholic. I'm not anything, to be honest, but I remember thinking this is a pretty decent guy. And had I been a Catholic, I would have been delighted with him.
Popes tend to be pretty decent guys.
So they say. Yeah.
Sort of what a pope is,
Yeah.
supposedly.
Yeah. Well,
Speaking of
yeah,
the
we get them.
religious bent, I have they've opened up the curtains, and whoever it is about to appear. Um, while we're on a religious bent, one of my early idols was a gentleman at St. Andrew's School for Boys in Swanee, Tennessee, where I went to high school after getting thrown out of real high school. And his name was Father Lee Stevens, strikingly handsome, sort of like a Jeff Chandler for you older folks who would know what I'm talking about. Uh, and he gave a sermon one day where he was quoting Jesus, and it was a long piece. And when he got done, I lost track of who was Father Lee Stevens and who was Jesus. I mean, it was just one of those moments where the church froze, the little chapel we were in. So we didn't become buddies, but he knew that I really admired him. And then he left well, he didn't leave the Order of Holy Cross. He left the role of being their chief fundraiser. He was handsome and charming, had been an actor, so they would send him around the country to visit Episcopalian churches where the women just absolutely loved him and gave the church lots of money. So he went from Hollywood actor. He'll occasionally, if you see an old film, I always look for the credits. You'll see Father Lee Stevens. Well, not Father. You see Lee Stevens, and then he decided to be a hermit monk and a contemplative monk, which means it wasn't a total vow of silence, but he didn't have anybody to talk to because he went off to a cabin in the woods and would only come back to the main monastery occasionally to replenish his supplies. And on those rare occasions, I talked to him 3 or 4 times. He was kind enough to return my calls. And uh, the last time I talked to him, he went off to I started to say God-forsaken place, but to a monastery, which is bad enough in a country you wouldn't want to go to spend his latter years in complete solitude. Knowing he was leaving, I left word, please call me when you come in, and he did. And I said, Father, as you know, I'm one of your greatest admirers. What does it all boil down to? You've been thinking about this for 50, 60 years. What does it all boil down to? He said, well, Ben, I've got it figured out. There are men who admit to urinating in the shower, and the rest of the men urinate in the shower and lie about it. I said, that's it?
I'm gonna have to give that some thought, and I don't
60
want
years
to.
of priesthood and 20 years of absolute solitude, and that's what you got. He said, you
So
asked
he
for
was
the
saying
men.
men are men, is what he was saying.
I think that's what he was
Yeah,
saying, but
you
just
can't keep
crack.
them, you can't trust them, you don't want to throw them to the curb. You're just stuck with them.
Every time if I have a little down moment or whatever, I think, well, Father Lee Stevens figured all this out. And I remember, and of course, I'm one of those who won't admit to either side of that equation, but yeah, Father Lee Stevens had doped it out.
I
So
just checked
that's
on
my,
Twitter. You do have a new pope, and I guessed wrong in the green room, so
yeah,
sorry.
he's been announced, I guess. There was
Hmm.
another cardinal out there moments ago, but he has not yet appeared on the balcony. But I
Well,
don't think it's who you guessed.
it wasn't. His name is Cardinal Robert Prevost.
Huh.
I have no idea who
Wonder
he is.
wonder where he's from.
Don't know.
Well, the people who are listening to this aren't watching this at this point, so let's get on with our business.
Okay. Well, tell us, I know you always have some questions and thank you for talking with me about that. I know it's off topic for what we're talking about, but you're right. It is a very important day. And how often are you going to see a new pope show up? And there's a lot going on in the background, and it doesn't matter if you're Catholic or not Catholic. It's just, to me, it's still an absolutely fascinating
Yeah,
process.
yeah, it
So I'm
really
glad
is.
we talked about it.
And the Catholics are so good on pageantry and tradition and so on. You get caught. I repeat, I'm not Catholic. Gigi was raised an Episcopalian, but she's not really that either. She's just a Christian. But she was glued to the television, like this would change her life in some way. And there are millions, if not billions, I don't know where television reaches, millions and billions of people who feel exactly the same way. They're caught up in the moment. So between the Pope and Father Lee Stevens saying all men pee in the shower, uh, we've
Oh,
pretty much
sorry.
we've pretty much covered the.
I thought I was muted and I wasn't. By the way, the new pope is American.
Yeah. You did you just say he was American?
He's an American, which I find
Wow.
shocking. Yeah.
I'm still looking at a screen with just the purple or maroon curtain. So,
Right. Right. This
well,
is why I
that's
always go to
amazing. I,
Twitter.
I thought
Yeah.
if it was
Yeah.
an American, I would have thought Father Dolan
Father Dolan would be
would
my
be the
choice
one.
too. Right.
Well,
And he's going to be named the new Pope Leo. He is Pope Leo X1V, which is what, 14?
X one, but yeah,
Yeah.
14.
Right. I'll be darned.
Another thing, and we'll get to the sales training and all that we promised.
Or not. This is fascinating. So
Yeah,
let's just
the
talk about what we want to talk about.
I may have the number off a person or two, but this Pope is like number 267, and we Americans are proud of, you know, we're at President 47. You think they had over 200 popes before we came along. And I remember at the 200th anniversary of the United States, I had just moved up to this area and we went to the Folsom Rodeo, and which is world famous, and uh, had a wonderful time. And I thought, God, we're the oldest democracy on earth, or self-governing government on earth. Isn't that wonderful? And I was talking to my mother later in the day, who was raised in a house in Massachusetts, the front of which was 300 years old.
Right.
And so she said, "Oh, 200, yeah, yeah, we remember when you formed that." That
And I
puts a
think
little perspective on. I
it
went to
does.
a bar, for lack of a better word, a pub in England called the Fighting Cock, and I flew in our Learjet and was sort of full of myself, greeted by a band and local distributors and so on for Holiday Magic Cosmetics. And then they went to the Fighting Cock. We went to the Fighting Cock, and as you walked into the bar, you had to duck down because the door was shorter for their patrons of their day when it was built. And the bartender was nice enough to say, "Well, hi, welcome to Great Britain or England or UK, whichever one I was in officially." I found out later they're different, but to England. And what do you do? And I said, "Well, I'm president of Holiday Magic Cosmetics." And I don't think I mentioned the Learjet, but I would be prone to try and drop that into the conversation, and so on. I said, "This looks like an older bar. How old is it?" And he said, "Well, we just celebrated. I'm making up the number, but it was over 700. We just celebrated our 716th birthday. Every king and every queen in that period of time has been in here. Every prime minister has been in here. What did you say you do again?" I said, "Nothing."
I drink beer. You know,
Yeah, yeah. I
can you
go to
pour
old
me one?
bars. I go to old bars and drink beer.
I remember telling you, we must have known we were going to go down this track because I was telling you in our green room when I was a child, I had no idea what Catholicism was. I really didn't, had never heard of it. And I remember the little girl next door when we moved in, she climbed up to the top of the fence and introduced herself and said, my name is, I don't know what her name is now, but my name is Julie and I'm Catholic. And I said, my name is Denise and I'm American. I didn't know what the heck she was saying. And she just looked at me and said, okay. And we were friends after that. But, I didn't know. And I asked my mother, I said, what is Catholic? She said, oh, it's a religion. And that was the end of that. I didn't care anymore. I
Probably
just
didn't know
was,
what religion was
nope,
at that
I
age. Yeah.
did not. I did not. And I wouldn't have cared anyway, I don't think. Well, we weren't raised in a religious household, but I had not remembered that until we started talking in the green room and talking about a potential pope. And I went, oh, there's an old, long lost memory.
And I dismissed an American Pope just backhandedly because many people around the world believe we have enough stuff without without being Pope on top of that. But you're
Right.
absolutely right, Pope Leo, and he looks, I'm guessing 60s maybe.
And he's
So
from Chicago.
he may be with us for a while.
Yeah. And I thought that was one of the things that I was picking up in the last several days that they didn't want somebody too young because they don't want them to stick around forever and ever. Amen.
Hmm. Yeah,
Huh. It'll
but
be interesting to watch.
I didn't want somebody on a respirator either.
No,
So
no.
it ought to have some continuity. You ask about notes over the week.
Yeah.
uh, a little flurry. I may follow up with it on Facebook, but a little flurry erupted and they asked what our opinions were. Uh, when you go on Facebook, maybe it's on the others too, but when you go on Facebook and they start a story and then to hear the rest of the story or know the rest of the story, you have to click on the comments, which opens you up to 800 other ads for things. And frequently, the conversation went all week long. They don't finish the story. It's nothing but clickbait and so on. So I'm starting a worldwide campaign that anything that makes you go to comments to read the rest of the story, we don't go. And I started that a few days ago, probably missing some semi good things, but I don't care. I'm not going to be dragged through the maze while they're trying to sell me whatever to hear a story that I don't really care about and isn't going to affect my life. So, to those who during the week voted for don't click on comments to see the rest of the story, I'm with you. And the revolution starts here and now.
Where do I join?
Yeah,
I
don't
can,
click
I
on
can,
comments.
I can do like a little sign and wave it out in the front yard.
Yeah, start a, we have a, here in Placerville, California, we have a little group that's been demonstrating at the courthouse on the steps, 15, 20 people, 2 or 3 times a week. And there's not a marketeer among them. I drive past them once or twice a day, most days, because it's between me and the post office. Uh, and I don't know what they're campaigning for. I've gotten where I honk and they wave at me and I wave back. And I'm thinking I could really be excited about this, but I don't know who we hate or why.
See, this is why I live way out in the country. If there's three cars in the road at any point in the day, that's a traffic jam.
Yeah,
That means they're coming home from school, they're going, coming home from work, and it's a traffic jam.
uh,
Yeah, I don't want to live around people who just don't tell me what they're all about. I don't know. I'm not a people person. Three people is just too people-y for me.
when some event takes place and we're asked, did you go to the whatever? And I said, was there a crowd there? And they said, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, no, we didn't.
Nope.
If you see a
Yeah.
crowd, you don't see Ben and Gigi. So
For me.
a crowd to us is two people and somebody we're talking to.
Yeah, and if there's a dog, I'm good. I'm talking to the dog probably, but it's just, I like people. I've told you this before. I like people just fine for 59 and 3/4 minutes. But after that, I gotta go. I need to go home now. Yeah, and I'm not shy and I don't have any filters, but people do physically wear me out. I'm drained.
I can, since I've become a good listener, and I'm an excellent listener with a capital L. I read a story once about Nelson Mandela, who was known for his strength and fortitude and so on, locked up for 20 years or whatever, and his speaking ability. But they said his greatest strength was he was a dynamic listener, which is an interesting combination of words, but dynamic listener. And since then, I've become one. So I don't get worn out by conversations because I'm not talking. I'm just staring at them, rubbing my chin, and listening. And I learn a lot more than that, learn a lot more that way than I was learning before.
Right. And you told me a story, I think, about Bill Clinton, who you've always identified as an excellent listener.
Yeah, he was. Anytime you read a book about a great person, somewhere in there you will hear or read that when I was with him or her, I felt as if I were the most important person in the world or the only person in the world. That's a trait the great leaders have. They don't just jibber jabber, I call it. They listen. And the Bill Clinton story is somebody that we all know, I forget who it was now, was in the Oval Office with him. And he said it was almost unnerving because he listened to everything I said. He said I got where I was making up things to say since he seemed interested and staring at me and not breaking eye contact. And then they brought in some iced tea, and I thought, good, I'll have a psychological break here. And I can picture maybe big southern iced tea glasses because he said when he took a sip, I looked up and he was looking dead at me through the bottom of the iced tea glass.
I would
Didn't
leave. I would run from the room. That would freak me out.
Okay, another thing from our week of conversation where I took notes. I don't know what triggered me to remember this, but and I've posted a little bit about it on Facebook. Uh, Great questions to ask when you're checking the backgrounds of people you're thinking about hiring. Besides, when did he come to work there? How long was she there? Et cetera, et cetera. Uh, Larry Wilson of the Wilson Learning Company, who was affiliated with Bill Gove and many of the great people of the somewhat older generation, even to me now, uh, taught me this. And I used it the other day teaching one of my mentoring clients how to do it. We had a person on that I was questioning about a, a potential hire, and my client was listening in. And here's what it is that Larry Wilson taught me. Mr. Zwicky, we're not absolutely certain about Bob yet, so let me ask you something. If we don't hire him, would you like us to send him back to you? And the guy I said
Ooh.
that to went, no, which meant that all the nice things he said about Bob before were a
Right.
lie.
And these days you can't even ask what kind of person they were or what kind of employee they were.
Yeah, I guess
So
I'm
you
probably
have
going
to
to get
kind of go
sued.
around. No, what you're saying is you just, find another way to get to the information you need.
Yeah, and that is just a killer. So if you're listening and you ever have reason to interview people who used to have working for them as an employee, someone you're interested in, remember that. We haven't totally made up our minds yet. If we decide not to hire him, would you like us to send him or her back to you? And I tell you, it's like truth serum.
They
It
can't,
is.
they can't, instant knee jerk. It just pops out.
Yeah. Can you imagine somebody arrives on your doorstep who you don't like and Mr. Zawicki, I understand you want me back. I don't think so.
I like it. See, that's the kind of stuff that I just live for. Okay, keep going.
The another one, testimonials, the value of testimonials. and this is, I'll give credit to Rob Anspach. He talked about it the other day, which sort of brought it to the front of my mind. Uh, but it's something everybody in sales and marketing sort of knows, but doesn't use much. When you're selling or writing ad copy or doing a television commercial, whatever, what direct mail, whatever your method of communication is during the sale, use testimonials. The General Mills says you should eat this food. That's interesting. That's what General Mills, of course, wants you to do. Bobby, who lives on Spring Street in your town, says it's the best stuff he's ever eaten in his life. That will push you much farther down the road to making a purchase than will General Mills telling you they make good whatever widgets
Right.
and that you should eat them. And I thought of that the other day. I was I've seen the television commercials for drink olive oil. We're all supposed to,
What?
yeah, we're supposed to have a tablespoon or two or something like that of
My
olive oil.
grandmother used to make us drink castor oil. I just
Well,
gagged.
that's a separate issue.
Oh,
Olive oil is sort of a quick way to a Mediterranean diet, but I didn't do it because I'm the guy who doesn't listen to the commercial. I read the disclaimer in the tiny print at the bottom. Many of the medicines they advertise on television, you have skin rash, take this. Then you read the thing at the bottom, may lead to shortness of breath,
or
earwax
death.
coming out
My
of your ears,
favorite's the
or
death.
death. Yeah.
Yeah,
Many of them
that's in
say, or
every one of them. Yeah,
or-
yeah. It's like,
I
no,
think,
thank you.
yeah, I'll just keep the skin rash. Thank you very much. But in the olive oil commercials, they weren't offensive. It was just I thought, oh, the Olive Board or the International Consortium of Olive Growers, whatever it is, has put up a nice little ad, and I understand their motivations. They're trying to sell more olives. Got it. So I haven't put it on the grocery list. I'm sure we have had olive oil in the house, but it was for salad dressing or whatever Gigi uses it in. Uh, so the other day, I'm talking to Patrick Hall, Pat Hall, an old friend of mine, 35 years or so. And I said, out of politeness, he sounded fine. I said, well, Patrick, how are you feeling? He said, fantastic. He said, I probably haven't told you, but a few months ago, I started taking 2 tablespoons of olive oil every night right before bedtime. And he said, although that's not important, once a day is what's important. And he said, my skin is better. Uh, what little problems he's had there, here and there, gone, and this and this and this. And he said, so how are you? And I answered, whatever. But I made a note on my ever present memo pad, add olive oil to the shopping list. And so now I can't claim any miracle changes yet. A, I didn't really need any miracle changes. And B, I've only been doing it for a couple of weeks. But every night at right before bedtime, I have a shot glass of olive oil. And
And
Gigi has,
you don't throw it up? I'm
no,
I'm
no.
gagging just thinking about it.
It's at least the one we get, which is pure virgin olive oil,
Right. I have the
uh,
same at home.
is a little more bitter than I thought. I pictured olive oil as just, sliding down your throat, but it's not. I don't find it objectionable at all. And especially after a day or two where now I know what to expect. But the point of the story is the value of testimonials. Pat Hall has no medical degrees. He has no, uh, he's not dying of lack of olive oil or anything. He's just a regular guy who I know, like, and trust, if that sounds familiar. I know, like, and trust Pat. He said he's had miraculous results with olive oil. So, bang, Ben Gay and Gigi Gay are on the olive oil uh, regimen, and we're doing it every night. And we're going to upgrade to an even better, I don't know if there is a better one, but even better grade of, we're going to scour the shelves and see what's better. And it's one of those things, unless it causes shortness of breath and death, I'm
Yeah.
gonna I'm going
Yeah.
to be taking olive oil every night for the rest of my life. The point, though, is what pushed me over the edge. Listen up, salespeople, testimonials. People want to know that other people have tried it and liked it, or it had amazing results, or what have you. And if you can do that, do it with detail. On Facebook, I either have put in or will put in Patrick Hall, Ventura, California, said to me, blah, 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 to make sure they understand I'm dead serious. Say who did it and with their permission, first and last name, with their permission, city, state, and if it's appropriate, the company they're with. If you're doing a business to business
Right.
sales presentation, say the company they're with. In the front of the closers books, at least at part one and two, the first two or three pages are loaded up with testimonials, other people in sales who used the book in its early days and had miraculous results. And it sells a lot more books than it would without the testimonials for the person at the bookstore flipping through it. They look for the forward, the who else has liked it, if anybody, who gave a book review, etc. By the way, I won't name it because I got to get him to fix it, but a book I wrote the forward for, and it has the National Association of Professional Salespeople seal of approval on the front of it. As I went to tell him, because I read the book rapidly and it was quite good, as I went to tell him, I looked on the cover and it says Forward by Ben Gay III. Forward spelled
How is
F
it
O
spelled?
R W A R D.
I
So,
knew it.
and I
Yeah.
will have to admit, because I think it's funny, in the closers part one, which was my first real book, I'd done a couple of the little books that I don't even remember the names of them. They were just uh, filling time, I guess. But in the front page of the closers part one, forward is misspelled. And I've known that for 35 years and have decided to leave it. And no one ever catches it. But I figure on the cover of this new book, it might pop out to people. So if you're listening and you're writing a book, folks, it's Forward, not moving forward.
Yeah.
It's
Two different
before
things.
the
Yeah.
words.
Yeah. And one thing, I'm still watching the Pope. Sorry, I'm a little bit distracted. When we're talking about these books and what you're talking about, and we're talking about, you know, get those recommendations, that goes way, way, way back to word of mouth before we had the internet, before we had Yelp, before we had anything. Word of mouth was the way to get anything done. And we're still
Absolutely.
doing it in different ways. Like you like olive oil. I cook with it and, I use it for my salad dressing. I'm on team castor oil. I love that stuff. I get cold pressed. I wash my face. I don't like chemicals on my skin. I never have. So I don't buy I used to buy a bunch of very expensive products and say, nothing magical is happening here. It's not gonna. I mean, just give it a rest. Take good care of your skin. Stay out of the sun if you can. And, put something on your skin that's good for you and as natural as it can be. And I love castor oil twice a day. It goes all over me. I come out of the shower, castor oil. I have a spray bottle. I just spray it and off I go. Love that stuff.
Well, there's a testimonial. So listen up, folks.
And it
Denise
costs you almost
Griffitts,
nothing. You don't have to, spend a lot of money on QVC or wherever you're going to go. Get some good cold pressed castor oil.
the I will make a note of that. I'm running out of time in a day for all the things I do based on uh, other people's recommendations. But I've never been led astray. I've never had a friend recommend something to me or an first name, last name, city, state. Never had one that backfired on me. Generally speaking, people won't endorse things. And if they do on television now, it has to say paid endorsement or the
Right.
person was
Yeah.
reimbursed or something.
Influencers, I hate that tag, but yeah, there's a lot of them that you're like, you did not. No way you are doing what you say you're doing. No. But,
The
yeah.
one I worry about is the guy who has the uh, mineral thing, 70 different minerals. It's sort of like a friendly competitor to the vegetable pill people
Oh, yeah.
who are on every few minutes. Anyway, he's got the dyed premature orange hair. I'll spot you, but he looks healthy and strong, and he's 90 something. And he keeps saying, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm taking these, and that's the reason I've lived so long. That's fine. But when he croaks, which will not be in the too distant future based on the actuarial tables, you got to come back on and say, take them, even though they didn't save him. You know, you sort of dig yourself into a hole when you're totally reliant on one person who may die on you.
Oh,
Uh,
they will. We
yeah,
all,
of course they will.
yeah.
The
That's a
vegetable
given.
people had the best spokesman I have ever seen in my life, ever. I don't know his name, but he was sitting on a small boulder endorsing that the minerals are over here and the vegetables over here, and you take 6 a day and so on. They're on every few minutes, and I can't think of their name, oddly enough. But the first spokesman they had was the best, most believable person I've ever seen on television. Don't know who he was, just a regular guy, he seemed like. And I said, I'm gonna get some of that. He is really something. And the next week, he died.
Oh,
And I thought, oh my God. He
well, I'm glad
a
I
he
didn't invest in that. So,
yeah, he finally reached the big time,
all right.
and B, he died.
Oh,
So
that's too bad.
that's one of those. Well, it was several years ago, so I've gotten over the shock, but it was a great marketing lesson. You were talking about word of mouth. I've discussed this before, but again, a sales and marketing lesson. I have an 86% closing rate. So, and it's been going on so long, it's very hard to move it at all. You know, if I sell five today, significant sales, it's not going to bump it up to 87 because we're talking about 100,000 sales presentations since I started roughly keeping track of it. But still, 86%. And people say, oh, that can't be true. It is true. That's what it is. 86% because I sell only quality products and services that are B, competitively priced. They don't have to be the cheapest, but you don't want to be embarrassed by the pricing. And C, or three, whichever one I'm using, I spend my days talking to qualified people. I always talk about ocean liners. The guy next door to me is not in the market for an ocean liner. So if I was selling them, I would spend zero time with him. He probably wouldn't even know I was selling them. But there are people who do buy ocean liners, are in the shipping business and so on. That's who I'd spend my whole day with. Nobody wants to get cancer. You come out with a pill that prevents cancer, I'll be up and down the street with my wagon dragging behind me like Krispy Kreme donuts I used to do. Because nobody wants to die of cancer.
No.
So qualified prospects is sort of an important thing. I said all that to say this, my closing rate was 86%. When I ran the National Communication Center, which at the time was the world's largest answering service and order taking service, the closing rate of the people on the floor, we had 150 operators at any given time, people on the floor, their closing rate was right at 100%. Here's why. The people calling in had heard through effective advertising, word of mouth, testimonials, whatever, they'd heard about the product. So they arrived predisposed to buying. And there was, people back then would say, because I already had my rate established, well, you claim you're at 86%, your people at almost 100%. And they're just housewives who needed a job or men between jobs or whatever. How do you explain that? And I said, effective marketing. And
Right.
marketing
And
is
they
a,
were pre-warned. They knew exactly what they were calling for.
yeah, when
They
they
were
picked
going,
up
these
the
days we call it a funnel, but that you were doing early funnels.
they were being done to me. I
Ah,
wasn't smart enough to know what was going on. I just knew that they hardly ever missed a sale, hardly ever. And some of them were so good, we would monitor their phones to make sure they weren't cheating. We had a lady it's called a traffic service factor, from "thank you for calling, how may I help you" to "have a wonderful day" is the length of time you're on the phone. If I talk to somebody in a call center and I'm aware that it's a call center, I always say, look, I'm trying to protect your traffic service factor. Let's go quickly, because he or she will be judged on how quickly you get a call on and off. Well, one of the ladies who worked for us, now she had some hangups in there and disconnects and so on, which tend to drive the averages down, but she had virtually 100% closing rate, and her traffic service factor was 57 seconds from hello to goodbye, with name, street address, city, state, zip, what you want, and credit card number.
but they were
50,
there to get what they wanted. They didn't want to be chatted to.
right, and she knew how to move them along.
Right.
So uh, that's the value of testimonials and word of mouth and referrals and so on. They come to you as lay down sales. At that point, your only job really is to bump the sale up. You know, they called, which is another thing in selling you should always have. They taught me this at Macy's when I was a teenager. Know every product on the floor, know its benefits. I was in the housewares department. Know its benefits and have two tie-ins. For instance,
Right. Up
if you're buy,
sales.
yeah, if you're buying the frying pan with a Teflon on it, wonderful. That's a lay down sale. They came in to get the Teflon pan, probably, or they saw the demonstration, which a lovely lady used to put on the floor all the time back when we were amazed with nonstick stuff. But her secret was, and the reason she was so wonderful was, you bought the fry pan, brand new concept, and the lid, which was extra, and the spatula, which was extra, and the this and the this and an apron and so on.
Oh, I
Because
forgot about the spatula because you couldn't use metal.
oh yeah, now
Yeah.
these were rubbery looking things, but yeah,
Right.
my favorite Macy's story, we were selling Corningware, and they came out with a new thing called Cornell, which sort of looked like, if you squinted, it looked like fine china, and it was unbreakable. So I
No,
heard
trust
that.
me, it wasn't.
Yeah, I heard that in the training class, had no way to test the concept, so I went right out on the floor, and within a few minutes, I was talking to somebody about a Corel. And I said, and it's unbreakable. And I picked up a teacup and dropped it on the hard linoleum floor on the third floor at Macy's in the house where it's dropped, and it didn't break. It turned to powder.
As a young married, I got everything. Some of it's still in my house. It was early matrimony and early St. Vincent de Paul's. And my first set of dishes came from Vincent de Paul's. And I learned pretty quickly, if you throw them just right, they bust. So,
And only a man who's been married to three Southerners would know that you don't encourage them to throw dinnerware at you.
no, but they're cheap. You could just run back to St. Vincent's and pick up another set.
Well, that's uh, that on that, and a couple of other things. The get them involved. I made a note of that. Somebody said something to me during the week. Get them involved in the process. Use the product. Uh, have to add a little something to it to make it work, make it theirs emotionally and physically. And the example I came up with in my mind is the old add an egg thing. When Pillsbury and various people started marketing their pre-mixed things that were pretty good, they quickly discovered that the housewife, generally in those days, that's who they were marketing to and who was using it. The housewife felt left out. She wanted to feel needed. She's the mother, the homemaker, the so and so. And if all you have to do is pour it in a bowl, add water, etc., sales went down in spite of the convenience until somebody in their marketing department said, let's have them add an egg, get them involved. Now, the egg could have already been in the mix, and many of them they didn't bother to take it out. It was dried and fulfilled its purpose. But by putting a fresh, raw egg in the bowl before it got stirred up, that was hers. That was her homemade whatever.
So I would
Minus
have
the,
never thought of that.
well, it sort of makes sense. If you think about it, you go, well, yeah, I can see how, when you go, I make an onion dip. It's the only reason we get invited places is we like to have you here on such and such day. Can Ben bring his onion dip? And it
You
only
can't
has
let
three.
me. It's sour cream. It's a package of dry onion soup. And what's the third thing?
It's I call it one third, one third, one third, although it's not. It's equal amounts. I use those containers, so, and the bars. Sour cream, 3 containers, the one that's about the size you could eat out of.
Right.
I don't know the ounces, but I know it when I see it. 3 bars of cream cheese.
Cream cheese, really? I'll have
Yeah,
to write that down.
and then a red onion about the size of a softball.
Well, see, I make it quick. Throw in the dry stuff into sour cream, let it sit in the refrigerator for a while, and here you go. I'm done.
That's the other secret is I make it the day before we go
Right.
anywhere, so it sits in the
Right.
refrigerator overnight, and then we take about half of it and keep about half of it. It gets better day by day. On the fourth or fifth day, it is magnificent.
It's like gumbo. You never eat it straight off the stove.
Right, exactly. So, but when people, I can't believe I just said that to you out loud. It's sort of simple, but I don't tell people about it because I want to get invited to places where I don't have to do anything but bring the onion dip.
Nobody's
Oh,
going to do
and
it
the other
because you have
secret
to.
to
That's
that
a
is
lot of work. There's 3 ingredients, man. That's just too much.
the stirring, although you use the mix master, whatever you call that big thing
Right.
on top of the 50-pound utility thing on top of the refrigerator, I'm getting to the point where I may have to leave it down all the time because getting it down and putting it back are interesting. But I've never told anybody. It came from my mother, although it's known as Ben Gay's onion dip. I sort of skip over her contribution. The I don't tell anybody because I want to be invited to certain or have the ability to say yes or no to certain invites. And I'm not kidding when I tell you I am clear, minus the onion dip, the invitations would drop in half.
Oh,
And well, that's fine. I can say yes or no anyway. But it's miraculous. And when they say, "Well, how do you do?" I said, "Well, I'd like to tell you, but it's more complicated than it looks." And so on.
it's more
And there,
complicated than mine. Seriously, 2 ingredients, toss it in the fridge. Here you go. And I'm a cook. I love to cook, but when it comes to things like that, well, I do it the way my mama did it. So that's how I was taught.
and you mix up the sour cream and the cream cheese to it's ready to serve before
Ah,
you add the onions because you don't want them all beat up in the mixer and everything.
right.
And the mixer is one of those big things. It's like a claw made out of rubber or something. So it's not cut. And I fixed it one time with a regular mixer, and it brought out all the acid in the onion. And some of
Mm.
my biggest fans took a bite and spit it back in their bowl and said, God, this is terrible. I'd used the wrong mixer.
Oh,
And the other secret to this, where it's not as stressful as it used to be, I keep from the dollar store, which is no longer a dollar, but I keep from the dollar store 5 or 6 bowls, about 3 or 4 times the size of a cereal bowl in the pantry so that when we take the onion dip, I'm not thinking, how do I get my bowl back and so on. For $1.25, you can have the bowl.
yep. I do the same thing. I use glass in all of my cooking and storing, but I've always got people coming and going, and and I'll tell them, bring your own Tupperware. It's not Tupperware, but bring your own plastic.
Yeah,
And if they don't have any, I have some that I don't use, but here you go, and don't bring it back. I don't want it back.
yeah. Yeah, not only do I not need it back, I don't
Yeah,
want it back.
no.
Okay,
Okay, so
another quick one for you, for our folks. Here's a way to make some money if you have a brick and mortar store. And it's not making money so much as drawing traffic. Uh, Porch pirates have become the thing. Even we live sort of out in the country and in an isolated suburb, one way in, one way out. And I set up a neighborhood watch thing years ago, but occasionally people still follow the UPS truck, go up on the porch, not here. We're here most of the time. You come up on my porch, you better have a really good reason to be there. So you don't want to give your life for a box that you don't know what's in it. But for porch to prevent against porch piracy, if you have a brick and mortar place, to give your customers permission to use it as a drop-off spot for UPS, FedEx, etc. Uh, so they don't fear their stuff getting stolen, but they have to come into your shop once or twice a
oh,
week to
right,
pick it
right.
up. And while they're there, it'll make you shape up your store if nothing else. While they're there, they'll look around.
Well, they're
Now,
almost honor bound to do something for you,
mhm,
even if it's a pack of gum.
yep,
Oh,
yep,
that's brilliant.
it is brilliant.
Yeah.
That's the joy of knowing me. You get brilliant things.
Well, another joy is in the green room. You were talking about, I think they're gulls that you said were hanging around the smokestack.
Yeah.
On Twitter, the birds are saying, "Why are those people cheering for us?" So,
Yeah. Nice they came here, but why?
yeah, we really appreciate the cheers and the laughter and the prayers, but can y'all just feed us?
Yeah, piece of trivia to drive your friends crazy. There's no such thing as a seagull. There are
Right.
gray gulls and there's various other kind of gulls. And Fox News has said, look at that seagull 800 times in the past 4 or 5 days. And I'm yelling, there are no such thing as seagulls. It's like being a reformed drunk. I called them seagulls for years until one day in the Coast Guard on San Francisco Bay, somebody corrected me and I went and checked, and sure enough, they were right. But he's the most photographed gull in the world, to say the
Right.
least.
That's what you were saying, and I went and looked it up. It's like, yep, there he is. And he looks completely unconcerned about it.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to understand he's caught up in history.
Right. Right. Well, what else we've got a couple more minutes. What else did you want to share with our audience, who
I've got
probably at this point thinks we're back crap crazy, but it's one of those days. It's a big day.
this is one that came up, and I put it up on Facebook. So if you listen to us here and then read my Facebook post, you've heard it, but it's worthwhile. Bill Shatner, one of the imaginary astronauts, he took the little joyride a year or so ago. He said, or was quoted as saying, "Never meet your heroes," which is an old
Right.
adage and true. And I covered it on Facebook. Never meet your heroes with inflated expectations.
And we talked about it in our last podcast too, so
Yeah,
everybody go listen to that.
I've met some I've met and shaken hands with and known all 12 men that walked on the moon, dozens of astronauts, flight status astronauts, a couple of kings, a queen, I'm sure a scattering of princes and princesses, and some of the most famous names in the business world and so on. Every one of them, when we got behind the scenes, was just a regular human being. So my point in that article was give them room to be just a regular human being. Don't be all disappointed when they burp or do something very human like and go, oh, there goes my image of them. A cousin of that story is Roy Rogers. My father sold him his ranch, and he and Dale Evans, their ranch in Apple Valley, California in 1948. And for years, and we lived in the only occupied non-Native American house in Apple Valley in the beginning, and the office was just being built. So Roy and Dale had to come to our house to sign the papers. And I've told the story about meeting my hero. When I was growing up, you were either a Roy Rogers fan or a Gene Autry fan. You couldn't be both. And I was a Roy Rogers fan. And to add to the story, I'd met Roy Rogers. So one day I'm telling the story, and my mother happens to be in the group. And when I finished, it went, "Oh, what was he like?" Mother said, "You never met Roy Rogers." I said,
Oh,
"Yes, I did. He came to the house and signed the papers to buy his ranch, his first ranch." And she said, "That's true, but you were at school."
your mom was just brutal.
Yeah, I
She
thought,
really
you
was.
could have gone the rest of your life, mother.
Yeah, you could have just taken me aside and say, listen, little
Yeah.
Ben. But she was that way about Santa Claus, though, too, wasn't she?
Yeah. She died 33 years ago yesterday.
Oh, I'm
And
sorry.
but the first thought that crossed my mind was, did you have to tell me I hadn't met Roy Rogers? So she hadn't read my article or my piece on don't get destroyed
Right.
by not meeting them. And with that, I'm done.
Well, and this has been fascinating in so many ways because we get to talk about true history. I mean, it really is history. Listen, I watched the Pope's Francis. I got up at 2 in the morning and I watched the whole thing. I didn't like it. I'll be honest with you. It just went on and on and on and on, but it was history and I didn't want to miss it. Now, the one before that, I watched it. I was fascinated, but it was a different crowd. It was a different, I can't even tell you what was so different about it, but this one seemed very dry to me, and there wasn't a lot of heart in it that I could detect. But, the Pope before that, and even the Pope before that, those were moving, those were touching. This one, I didn't find it to be so, but that's just my perspective. And, I'm watching this saying, I'm glad to be here to see it. History is so important, and we should never really forget it. Or, just go,
Gigi and I
well, I'm not going to pay attention to that. It's not important. It is important.
the Gigi and I were laughing about that this morning before it was announced. And I said, we're sitting here waiting, wondering who it's going to be. And we, as non-Catholics, don't know a single candidate,
Yeah,
don't know
same
the
here.
name of or what, So
Right.
when he comes out, we'll go, oh, who is that?
Right. And I was doing the same thing when we were having our chat in the green room, and I immediately went to Twitter or X because that's where I get my news before any other news shows up. Listen, I remember when President Trump was elected the first time, and my mom was still with us, and she's like you, was in California, and she was telling me, okay, Fox is saying this, and this one's saying this, and I was like, Mom, it's done. She said, no, 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 it's not on the TV. It was on Twitter. You know, and I said, Mom, I'm going to prove it to you right now. New York Times has called it. What? She was so upset that she wasn't getting it in her living room. And I'm, 2,000 miles away going, it's done. It's over. He's the president. She was all excited about it, but it just wasn't happening the way she thought it should be happening.
It's a good thing she wasn't crouched by her radio.
No. Oh, geez. Yeah. I suspect that, her grandmother would have been, when I don't even know how old these people were, but you're right. TV wasn't around when my grandparents were around. Had to come through the
Wasn't
radio.
around when I was young
Oh,
because the vice president of RCA lived next door to us. RCA, uh, and his name was Elmer Eads. And Elmer and his family got the first television in Atlanta. There was only one television station, and it wasn't broadcasting, I don't think, certainly not before 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And we, a few days later, got the second television in Atlanta.
um,
Didn't come on till 5. At midnight they played the Star Spangled Banner and or the Bluebird of Happiness, and it went off, and
Right.
black and white, of course, and a very small screen, a little bigger than about the size of a turkey platter, if that. So things have changed a bit. You and I have talked about it. I would love to have my father walk in here and mother, but dad was the business person, office person. Have him walk in and see me sitting here with a television to my left, color, 200 channels. I'm guessing that 198 of them we don't watch, but we got it, and a computer screen, uh, and I'm talking to you on a headset. That
And I'm
all of those,
2,500 miles away from you.
yeah, all of those would just. But he would, first of all, he wouldn't be able to comprehend them. He wouldn't be amazed. We'd spend the first part of the day going, "What's that? What's this? What's that? How are you doing that?" and so on. And I think about that now that I'm playing the back nine in my personal life. I think about all the things that are coming that I won't know about. A chip behind your ear that gives you all the knowledge in the world, facts in the world, maybe not knowledge and wisdom, but all the facts in the world, and a chip behind your other ear that reconnected your spinal cord and enables you to walk around after 20 years in a wheelchair. And the fact you don't know anybody who ever died of cancer because they don't die of cancer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Amazing times, almost scary times in some
It
ways,
is.
are coming, but I've
Yeah.
already lived through a lot of those. My first friend when I moved to Atlanta was a guy who'd been born in a slave shack behind a mansion across the street from our house, and he still lived in the slave shack. Uh, so almost everything that exists today that isn't made out of stone or wood was invented or developed within, his name was Arthur, within Arthur's lifetime. Now he's been gone a
Yeah.
while now,
Yeah.
but he saw all that. And now you and I are seeing the next generation, and God knows, and I mean that in a positive way, what the next generation is going to be,
No,
assuming
no.
India and Pakistan don't start a nuclear war in the next few
Yeah,
months.
that's a whole nother thing. But like you, I've been having the same kind of thought process. My mom was an absolute news junkie. She was fascinated with all of it. And we would get on the phone and talk until the middle of the night. And we would just talk about anything and everything. And I'll see something or hear something. I really don't watch the news. If I do, it's Newsmax, and it's only if I'm looking for something in particular. And I've only started watching that since July. I get my news in a lot of different places, but not coming into my living room as the rule. And I catch myself thinking she would be so blown away by so
Mhm.
much of what's going on. And I miss talking with her. I really do miss my mom because she would be fascinated. She would be appalled, but she would be fascinated.
Mother, when those things come around on Facebook and the internet, and they say, if you could have any person, living or dead, to have dinner with and spend a few hours with, who would it be?
My
And
mom,
of all the people I've studied in history, the hundreds of books I've written, the answer is mom and dad.
right, right. And I mean, she's only been gone about 4 years now, but the things that have changed are just astonishing. There's so much of what's going on now, she wouldn't recognize it. If she were to pop in behind my shoulder now and she'd say, like your dad, what is that? What? What's going on there? Whoa, it would be amazing. And I think about it a lot, but
My first encounter, picking up on exactly what you're talking about, my first encounter with NASA, before I became the attitude coach for Apollo 15, 16, 17, was to watch Apollo 14 take off. I was sitting in the VIP stands, thanks to the Harringtons, dear friends of mine. He was the supervisor of the manned space program. Um, Sitting in the VIP stands, the Supreme Court, I think all of them were behind me. And in front of me on the front bench was an old black gentleman named Charlie Smith, believed to be the oldest living American. He was brought to this country chained in the hold of a sailing ship and
Mm.
sold on the docks of Charleston, South Carolina. And Dan Rather or somebody like that came up to him and said, Mr. Smith, you're about to watch this rocket take off and go to the moon and come back with rocks and everything. What do you think? And Charlie Smith said, if they come back with rocks, it's because they took rocks with them.
Oh.
Charlie Smith had gone as far as he was going. I'm not sure he even knew why he was there, although he seemed lucid and all. But my point is, everything, everything you and
Mhm.
I know, other than wood, stone, and paper, was invented in Charlie Smith's lifetime.
I have the same thought. I think about my grandmother who would talk, my great grandmother would talk about going across the United States. She was so proud. She would go across, she went across the United States in a covered wagon, literally, and
Wow.
she was so proud because they let her have the reins. What she didn't understand was her horses were just following the horses in front of her.
Yeah.
She wasn't steering anything. But I think about these things. It's like, wow, things have changed. And then a week from now, things will have changed yet again. So this
Sure.
is why I'm going back to history. Pay attention to your history, your family's history, world history. It's all, there's really nothing new, I don't think, but it's presented very differently. But you're right. And when Charlie was saying, well, if they're coming back with rocks, it's because they took them with you. I immediately thought ballast, ship ballast, which is the same
Oh,
thing with
okay.
the
Yeah.
astronauts.
Yeah. It was
So,
probably rocks on the ship he was on
right, right.
for ballast, not for curiosity from the moon.
Right, right. Well, listen, we are about to run out of time, and I know you want to go pay attention to everything that's unfolding with the Pope, and I do too, to be honest. So, listen, everybody, thank you for joining us for week 13 of the Closers Inner Circle podcast. We always appreciate you being here with us. And then when you have questions, shoot them to us. We will answer them. When I say we, that's Ben's job. Ben will answer them. And we will see you next week as we continue building your sales infiltration toolbox one proven step at a time. So until then, stay sharp, stay focused, and keep closing. Ben, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll see you next week.
All right.